Welcome to the Michigan Man Podcast on Wolverine Sports Radio, a member of the V Sporto Network, and in partnership with SB Nation's Maize and Brew, for Wolverine fans from coast to coast. Go Blue and welcome to the show. I'm your host, Mike Fitzpatrick. We are just about 5 weeks away from the start of practice. Season tickets will be arriving in the mail very soon. Most preseason magazines are out, and the very best of them, the Wolverine magazine, was in my mailbox this week. We'll have plenty of time for season preview shows in August. But today, Steve Lorenz from 24/7 Sports is back for our monthly recruiting update. As I'm sure you've heard by now, it was a big weekend for Jim Harbaugh and his staff. 6 verbals in the last week. It's a top 10 class and ranked just ahead of Ohio State as the best in the Big Ten. We should be excited about this class, but keep in mind it's only June, and much can change between now and the signing days in December and February. No one covers Michigan recruiting better than Steve Lorenz from 24/7 Sports. He joins me next here on The Michigan Man on Wolverine Sports Radio, a member of the V Sporto Network, and in partnership with SB Nation's Maize and Brew. Back with us for our June monthly recruiting update, and what a month it is, or at least, it's ending up that way, Steve. Steve Lorenz from 24/7 Sports. Great to have you back, Steve.
Thanks, Mike.
Well, we knew last weekend would be very important for Michigan's class of 2019, Steve. We talked about that the last time, and we'll get to the new verbals in just a minute, but would you say it exceeded everyone's expectations?
I think to an extent. I know they went into this visit weekend with a plan. It's obviously a weekend they've been targeting for a while. I think by and large, I'm assuming the staff expected to get multiple verbals. Whether it was maybe the exact list that has verbaled, I don't know. But I do know that it was a weekend that they had really kind of geared their summer around this date and then the barbecue at the end of next month, kind of the 2 days that the recruiting team was kind of building towards. And really, I feel like the staff kind of deserves it. I think there's been a lot of unfair criticism of the way they've been recruiting, and for them to get a couple guys who were literally at the top of their board, I think was great for the staff. Gives them a little bit of momentum going into July for the barbecue, and then, heading into the season. So I think it was, I'd say it probably slightly exceeded expectations. But I think they were due to get a few. It had been a while, since they'd really strung together, a couple good ones.
Well, as of this morning, we have 16 verbals in the next class, 6 of them in the last week. Well, let's talk about these new additions, Steve, and get your thoughts on them. Starting with Mozzie Smith, a kid who we've been talking about through the entire process, 4-star, 6'3", 290, out of Grand Rapids. Talk about him.
Yeah, a top target at defensive tackle for who knows how long at this point. Originally was battling Notre Dame. I think Michigan, caught, not necessarily catch wind of it, but once Notre Dame kind of started to maybe take the lead, I think Michigan really, really turned the heat up. That was months ago. That's why he's been a top target for them for pretty much since the process began, since they offered him. So, and that, I think Penn State was the other program that had kind of emerged maybe as a contender, but really, this is a guy I think we all kind of had pegged into the class at some point. It was just a matter of when he was going to do it. Great plug in the middle. I think defensive tackle is a spot they need at least maybe. I don't know if they'll take another. I think Chris Hinton could slide inside, but a true like potential one tack or nose tackle in the middle. I think Smith kind of fills that role. And another nice win for Greg Madison. He's done a great job on the defensive line. I think they're kind of building a potentially great defensive line class. There's a couple spots I think still left there and I think now they can maybe focus on the elite, and don't have to do all the legwork to, evaluate and maybe find some diamonds in the rough. I think now they can put all their attention on, the 5-star types. So yeah, Mozzie was a great addition. They beat Ohio State. Ohio State was still recruiting him. Already mentioned Notre Dame, Penn State. Michigan State hadn't really recruited him for a while, but he did have an offer there. They liked him early. So, yeah, nice win. But kind of one of those I think we all kind of figured. I think the crystal ball had been almost 100% Michigan for months now. So that was one of the ones that I guess you could say we sort of had a hunch it was going to take place this weekend. Just that he'd only visited Penn State. He'd kind of been taking the process slow. We knew he was a heavy Michigan lean. It made sense for him to maybe get it over with.
Well, reading the message boards over the weekend, fans were very excited about Mozzie Smith. The one that seemed to draw the most as far as people tweeting and on Facebook was the young man, the running back, 6'2", 215 from Westlake Village in California, Zach Charbonnet, 4-star kid. And I've seen a bit of tape on him, Steve. He looks like the real deal.
So he was the number one running back target on their board. And Mike, they were excited about Mozzie Smith and Charbonnet because they were 4 stars. Can't get excited about the other ones. You got to see how many stars they have next to their name before fans can get excited about them. So that's why the excitement was so big for those two guys. But in all seriousness, with Zach, number one running back target on their board, we've been reporting it for months. It wasn't just hey, they got this commitment. He was their number one back. We've talked about Quavaris Crouch a lot as a guy that really could play both ways in college. So I don't, he could play running back, but he's the guy that they're really telling he can play linebacker or running back or both, and so as far as a guy that they're strictly recruiting at running back, Charbonnet was definitely the number one target. Very quiet, enigmatic kid. I know before we got on, I told you he's only done one interview that I've ever seen, and it was our guy had to go to his school. I would bet anything that his offer list is much larger than what his profile suggests. He just does not. Matter of fact, he had held a Michigan offer for about 3 months before I actually found out that he had one, let alone that he was the top back on their board. So that tells you, and in this day and age, it's not really easy to do that anymore.
No.
Let alone play at he plays at a big-time program. The number one player in the country, Kayvon Thibodeau, plays at the same program. If that tells you the contrast, and how quiet he's kept things. So really, in my opinion, I think he's one of the biggest verbals they've gotten the last 2 or 3 cycles. I think he's a guy he already is a 4-star, but I think his rating and ranking is going to go way up. I think he's one of the top 5 backs in the country. I think he's going to probably be a top 100 prospect. I know Barton Simmons, our director of scouting, loves his game, has mentioned him multiple times. And Greg Biggins, our West Coast analyst, did a nice write-up, for 24/7 after the commitment, said the same thing, said he feels like he's one of the 5 best backs in the country on film. So, but again, doesn't go to the opening, doesn't go to the camps and all that kind of thing. So, you're going solely off game film. But again, he's one of those players, you turn on the film, you don't have to be like a guru of any kind to watch that film and say, this guy's really, really good. And to me, he's a little bit, compared him the other day to a sort of like a Leonard Fournette light. I could never compare somebody to Leonard Fournette because his high school film was unbelievable. But he does have that combination of power and speed, and neither of those attributes really diminish the other, so he can run fast with power and maintain that speed too. So really it's running back, I think, has been a position that fans have kind of maligned on the recruiting trail. Even though, again, you go back to last year, Christian Turner was legitimately one of their 3 or 4 top backs on their board. They loved him. But Charbonnet was number one, kind of gives Jay Harbaugh a really, really nice win on the recruiting trail. And, really couldn't understate how big this one is. He's a guy that they really, 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 really wanted.
Well, I know you and I, during our monthly updates, have talked about some tight ends. Eric All, 6'4", 225 from Fairfield, Ohio. I just cannot remember talking about this kid. How long has Michigan been on him?
Not too long. I think, there was Luke Deal, who committed to Auburn, I don't know, probably about a month and a half, couple months ago, was their top guy for a while. They've also recruited Isaiah Foskey out of California for a while as well. When Deal committed to Auburn, I think All is kind of the guy that maybe moved up to the forefront of their board. They had offered him shortly before Deal committed, but then really picked things up after that. You know, there were a couple other guys. There was a kid named Josiah Myaman out of New Jersey who actually came out and visited shortly after, maybe about 2 weeks ago, and Michigan had him up on campus, but I think they felt more comfortable with All, who'd been up there twice in the last month, including he camped there too, at the elite camp a couple Mondays ago, and was really, really impressive. So really a guy, you know, another guy. You talk about Barton Simmons, our director of scouting. After All committed, it's another guy that he said is going to move up the rankings too. And you know, I always say tight end, quarterback, and that like H-back, fullback type position if Michigan does recruit it. Those are three positions that Michigan fans should really just be comfortable with whoever the staff takes. The track records are too long. The development is there. I mean, you know, you got McCune was a 83, I think, or an 84, and played as a first year guy, and is now primed to, you know, I think to continue his progression in year 3 after having a nice year last year. So, you know, they know what they're doing there. And then All's a real, very, very natural pass catcher. Interested to see his development as a blocker, but that's kind of always the deal with these high school tight ends, because a lot of them are just kind of they're either undersized offensive linemen or they're oversized wide receivers, you know, and so that's kind of the job there is to kind of get them closer to a true tight end, you know, whatever direction that may be. So interested to see where he goes there. But again, I think he had Iowa, Minnesota, I want to say Florida State had just offered, Wisconsin, who's, again, Wisconsin, Iowa, I mean, they know what a tight end is too, you know, and so great addition for them. I think they could be done at tight end. I think they're still going to recruit Foskey, who I believe we've talked about a couple times. But besides that, I think it's really him or bust, in my opinion. So, and maybe they won't even push hard. I just don't know how many spots they have. Tight end was, I think, a spot they only wanted one, but we'll have to see. So, nice win out of Ohio. Al Washington continued to do a really good job there for them, and I like him. Again, another guy I think will move up the right. He'll probably be a 4-star here very shortly, so people can like him.
Well, late last week we got another Ohio recruit, one that I find intriguing because I really had not heard any mention of Joey Velasquez, 6 foot, 205 pounds, a safety in high school from a very good program, St. Francis de Sales in Columbus. He was a commit to Ohio State, but a baseball commit, supposed to be maybe the number one baseball player in the state of Ohio. So I've been reading that Don Brown very interested in using him at Viper, but somewhat of a surprise there, Steve.
I think a little bit. I mean, he'd been on the radar. I want to say, I'm trying to think of when they offered him. It was a little out of nowhere when they did offer him, but the baseball situation was something I think that kind of had to be worked out. He had to go talk with Bakich about whether it'd be a fit at Michigan, which, yeah, like you said, I think he's one of the top prospects in the Midwest. Yeah. So it's not like the Michigan baseball is going to say no. So, and they get him without scholarship. His scholarship's going to go towards football. So they pretty much get him, I believe, you know, without counting a scholarship against them, if I know the rules correctly. And he's one going to be very, very interesting as far as evaluations go, because he's a guy that, despite playing at a nice program like DeSales, has not really been evaluated much. Mm-hmm. So our Ohio guy, Bill Green, who does a great job in the state of Ohio, is definitely going to make a point to give him some good evaluations. I know his kind of big picture evaluation of him, without knowing a ton about him, is that he's a perfect fit for that Viper spot. I know the one thing that they really liked about him compared to maybe some other guys they were recruiting there was his physicality at the position, which we know, I mean, really, finesse isn't really something Don Brown seems to really be all that big on necessarily, especially in the front seven. And so he's physical, kind of reminds me of Hudson in that if you've seen him, he's jacked. He's a big kid, and he's very strong. And then obviously the multi-sport stuff. We know Jim Harbaugh, a lot of college coaches nowadays are really big on that stuff. So he's kind of the intriguing addition as far as like, I think everybody's going to have to learn more about him from our standpoint. Obviously the Michigan coaches saw what they needed to see. He had a great camp. He went to camp as well. He'd already held the offer, but I think they still wanted to see him in person at camp. He impressed, and here we are. So, going to be really interesting, but again, it's like what I've been saying is Don Brown is like John Beeline. Like,
yeah,
shouldn't be doubting their recruiting or who they like. They've done it for so long, and they've had such, especially at that Viper spot. I mean, Matt Milano was a nobody when he recruited him to Boston College, and the guy was an All-American, before he left. And now we've seen he got Jabril Peppers to the Heisman ceremony, and then Khaleke Hudson looks like he's going to be one of the best defensive players in the country this year, and so he knows what he's doing at that spot. I think they like what they saw, obviously, and felt comfortable enough to move forward.
Well, if anyone's been listening to us do our monthly update, Steve, we've been talking about how Michigan has really continued to hit in the Peach State in Georgia. And last week that paid off, or over the weekend. DJ Turner, who's a cornerback, he's rated as a 3-star, 5'10", 170 pounds, I should say, out of Sewanee, Georgia. Have they been on recruiting him a long time?
Yeah, they have. And really, if I was to compare DJ's recruitment to anybody, it'd be Jamon Green from last year, in that he was one of the first cornerbacks they offered. Mm-hmm. They recruited the heck out of him for the duration of the process, and they got him. And yes, and they both actually had the same rating. I think Jamon was an 88 as well, but was a guy that really was the take for them the entire time. And so in that's what I look at. And again, you look at what Michigan's done at cornerback. I think they know what they're doing there with evaluations and production. So, and not to mention, I mean, Turner had Clemson, Georgia, Notre Dame, Florida, Alabama. Like, he had a lot of big-time programs that had offered. Now, I think for a few of those, he might not have been a take anymore. I know he was still for, I believe, Clemson, Florida, Notre Dame for sure would have absolutely taken him, which, again, should be good enough for, anybody out there that wonders about the 88 rating or whatever. But, a guy that he's another one that I think we figured was probably going to end it here pretty shortly. And Michigan had held a lead for a really long time, and that's kind of the thing. It isn't hey, Alabama may be cool on him now, Michigan can get him. I mean, Michigan got him on campus at least 4 times, I believe, during his recruitment. So he's great friends with Chris Hinton, which I think probably helped him a little bit here. But obviously he liked enough on his own to go through with the commitment. And yeah, I mean, he's a top target for them for months and months and months, if not longer. I mean, so just like Green was, I mean, that's what Green committed earlier in the process. He committed in April last year, but was the same deal where Michigan was on him immediately and recruited him harder than anybody else for a longer amount of time. And then it paid off. So I look at those two as relatively similar, at least in the way their recruitment's played out.
Well, the last of the 6 most recent verbals was George Johnson III, listed as an athlete, 5'11", 180 pounds, from Stuart, Florida. He also is a 3-star. What are the plans for him that you've heard of, Steve?
I would suspect he'll probably play receiver. At least that'd be his primary position. But, Michigan has shown a like for taking the quarterback turned athlete. You look at Michael Barrett last cycle. I think Johnson's similar player. I probably liked Barrett a little bit more off of the film, but I really liked Johnson as well. A guy that just a dynamic playmaker. And I think it's difficult sometimes, I'd say, for like our analysts to grade a guy, let's say, because Michigan is recruiting him as like a slot receiver, but he'll also be a guy, maybe they could throw him in at a Wildcat, or maybe even give him a couple carries in the backfield, something like that. Like, it's exactly how they're going to use Barrett. I think Barrett starts out in the slot, and then they also mix in some different packages to get him the ball eventually. And it can be kind of difficult to evaluate a guy properly, I guess, when not a ton of his film is at slot receiver, because he does play quarterback for his high school team. But again, Michigan saw him live. Georgia's offered and wanted him. Florida State just offered and wanted him too. So they again go down to Florida, beat two big time programs for a player that both of those big time schools wanted. I suspect his recruitment. Because he's from Florida, it's not going to stop other programs from maybe pursuing him, even with the commitment, obviously. So, and he had just gotten all three. He had just gotten Michigan, Florida State, and Georgia within the last month. So I could still see some other big time programs maybe stepping in here. But great addition again. I know they just love the versatility on both sides of the ball. But really offensively, they've really taken a liking to these quarterback athletes who really just kind of look natural on the football field. I mean, that was the thing about Barrett. You just watch his film; he just looks like a guy that knows what he's doing, and is a great athlete to boot. And then that's kind of the way I feel about Johnson too. So always nice to go down in Florida and beat Florida State for a kid. I mean, there's just there's no better. Can't do much better than that, really. And matter of fact, I mean, Florida State offered him. It was less than a week ago. I mean, he was just there. It was right before he came up to Michigan for the official. And I think it gave him pause for a second. I think he was the Michigan lean heading in. Florida State offered, gave him pause, but he still decided to go with Michigan. So, that's great. You want to do that. You want to beat the Florida States and the Georgias for guys like that whenever you can.
Well, as we said, it was the biggest recruiting visit weekend of this cycle. A lot of big-time kids were here for the weekend. One of them who seemed wowed by the visit was Aeneas DeCosmo. He's from Bergen Catholic in Jersey. He just went on and on, especially about the academic piece. What does your crystal ball say about him right now?
So my crystal ball has been on Michigan for a while. It switched to Stanford. I didn't switch mine. Make that clear. You always got to tout yourself a little bit when you feel like you're going to be right. He visited Stanford, really liked it. A lot of the crystal balls went over to Stanford. I'd been told the whole time Michigan felt like they could win this one in the end. They duly impressed on the official visit as I expected them to. I think he's a great fit from both an athletic and just kind of just a social fit. I don't know the right way to say it. He kind of reminds me of like a Grant Newsome type kid, like a very, very, very bright kid who really is serious about the academics. Matter of fact, I think Grant's one of the kids that hosted him while he was on campus, or one of the guys he spent some time with, which is smart. In Michigan, in my opinion, if Michigan gives a kid to Grant Newsome to spend time with, that means that Michigan thinks that there's a really, really good shot with him, because Grant's such a good ambassador for the program and for the university, both athletically and academically. The kind of kids that they think will be a fit are the type of kids that they would put with Grant. So, and the other thing about Aeneas is, more than, I think, maybe Lance Dixon, who is not going to go to Michigan. I think those two guys, DeCosmo and Dixon, of anybody on their board, I think are the best fits for what Don Brown likes to do defensively, as far as there are so many different ways that they could use him defensively. I think they're going to recruit him at Sam linebacker spot, but he's a guy I think could put his hand down at some point. He can rush the passer. He can play in coverage a little bit. I think he's a perfect fit for them defensively. I think it's why he's been a top target for them for basically since they offered. So I think right now, I think Michigan's probably in a good spot. And I think he's probably going to decide probably about a month or so from now. I think he said early August is what he was targeting. But again, my crystal ball's on Michigan. I don't believe he's heading to Stanford. I think he was going to go see UCLA. I don't know if that's going to happen now or not. I think it is going to be either Michigan or Stanford. And I feel like Michigan did enough here, but we're going to have to see. So great kid though, really unique. I think his dad used to work for Nickelodeon. Very unique family. Seemed like a very cool family. You saw the interview probably with Sam.
Yeah.
On our site, and his dad's very, very insightful guy. Very, just good people. And again, I think, that'd be a great fit at Stanford too, right? I mean, I'm not saying it's, but they are a great fit. The family and the kid are a great fit for Michigan, both on and off the field.
With us on our monthly recruiting update, talking about a big weekend for Michigan football, is Steve Lorenz from 24/7 Sports. Steve, there was one defection, a couple of misses in the last few weeks. The defection was to Corey Couch out of Florida. I don't think that surprised you, did it?
No. I mean, it's kind of a, if I could say it on the podcast, damned if you do, damned if you don't type deal where, you know, they hosted, he wanted to come up for the official in April. You can't say no if you're Michigan. You definitely can't say no if he says he wants to commit. But then here you are, you know, Hollywood Chaminade's like 10 minutes from Miami's campus. And it's like he commits the whole time. Miami's probably like, they're probably thinking it's good that he committed to Michigan this early because now they got the rest of the process to flip him, and he's already used his official visit to Michigan, you know, so if he goes back up, he's got to pay his own way up there. Don't know his family's deal in that regard, but it's either way, it's not easy to pay your own way all the way up to Ann Arbor from Miami, I would assume. So yeah, I mean, it was kind of one of those things where, yeah, I mean, it's one of the least surprising decommitments that I can ever remember from covering this. And then, you know, it's unfortunate because he's a very, very talented player, was a perfect fit. They want that slot type nickel cornerback. I think Turner could be that guy, but Turner's also, he's 5'11" though. I mean, Turner could play on the outside. That's no different than Lavert Hill. He's about the same size as Lavert Hill, you know, so I don't think Turner's a guy that is destined to play on the inside. You know, he's a guy who can play on the outside too. So yeah, no surprise there. I mean, he's already committed to Miami. So, and that's, you know, a done deal, I would assume. So yeah, kind of a foregone. It was weird. Him committing in April may have lessened Michigan's chances of actually signing him, if that makes any sense. You know, just because, like I said, Miami probably sitting there like, good, this is a good thing. You know, I know our Miami analyst the day he committed said, well, that's not going to last very long. You know, and so it's like, yeah, you're probably right. So,
well, it is funny. I mean, the whole process, some of the things you hear, as soon as he flipped to Miami, he tweeted that, you always knew he'd end up in Miami. So you just have to laugh at some of this. So,
oh, you're telling me. I mean, and it's, you know, but the funny thing is, Mike, is like, I kind of said to myself after I read that, I was like, yeah, I kind of thought you'd end up in Miami too, to be honest with you. Like, I think I agree, you know, so, and that's what's like, the way I tried to dig a little bit on that about, you know, it's like, do you host a kid in April? What do you do in that situation? And what I was told is that from Michigan's standpoint is you have to kind of try to approach it on a case by case basis. Sounds like they felt comfortable with his family as far as like that they were in on Michigan and that, you know, so I don't know. Again, we had talked about this heading in, you know, that this was going to be kind of a learning curve or it's just a whole new thing, you know, for this staff. And when schools down south aren't even hosting kids on officials in the spring because they know that's where all the talent already is. They can just drive to those programs when they want to visit, and then they can wait. You know, if you're Georgia, you're hosting LSU for a big game this year, you can just wait and host all the kids in the season. Whereas when you're Michigan, you got a big kid from Miami that wants to come up and visit, pretty much got to take him when he wants to come up. You know, you can't really say, no, wait until the game against Penn State or something like that. You know, you got to kind of take your chance, you know. So it'd be interesting, like at this time next year, you know, to see how they approach the spring official visit season because, you know, say they got burned a little bit here, but again, I mean, it's like I said, if you're darned if you do, darned if you don't type deal. So, yeah, that's the stuff I like. It's interesting dynamic to me, how they're going to handle that and stuff.
You know, a couple of in-state kids got away over the weekend, Steve. 5-star Devontae Dobbs from Belleville chose Michigan State, and 4-star quarterback DeJuan Mathis from Oak Park. He flipped from the Spartans to Ohio State. And I just wondered when I read that, and I know we've talked about especially Devontae Dobbs along the way, but was Michigan really in on either of those guys?
Not for a while. I'm actually glad Devontae committed, so I don't have to answer questions about him anymore. That was one of the most annoying parts of this cycle, which stinks because he's a great kid, and he's going to be a really good player for Michigan State. Cool little story about him. He actually got his dad to quit smoking, so I always check in with him every once in a while to see if he's stayed on it, and he has. I thought that was really cool, you know. But he's a really nice kid, good kid. Great pickup for Michigan State, but Michigan really hadn't been a factor there for a while for whatever reason. So they didn't make his top 8, which whatever. pretty clear, though. Like, he had gone an official to Auburn. He had other officials scheduled. Funny how recruiting works. Pretty sure, I mean, we all figured he was going to go to Michigan State. And I think Michigan State, after Michigan had a big weekend, I think Michigan State probably said, hey, like, you know, time for you to go public. We need to build up some momentum here ourselves. Like, I just don't think it's a coincidence. I think he had an official visit to USC sometime in the next week or whenever maybe when the dead period was over. I can't remember. But he had a few other ones scheduled too. So for him to end it kind of abruptly is, I think Michigan State saying like, hey, you know, like we need to, you know, Michigan's stealing a little bit of the thunder right now. Let's get the big guy in the boat. I mean, he's the number one player in the state. So, you know, do that for them. So great pickup for them. And then with Dewan Mathis, no, Michigan never really showed a ton of interest, mostly because he wanted, you know, primarily at quarterback. I just don't think Michigan was super sold on him at quarterback. I'm interested to see. I think he's the very, very boom or bust prospect, and I don't mean that in a negative way. Just I think he's got the tools to be a really, really good player. You know, we'll just have to see. You know, I think it's a interesting pickup for Ohio State. I don't know if they'll take a second quarterback this cycle or not, but he was good at the Elite 11. I was a little bit surprised he didn't make the finals, actually, based on where he had ranked in some of the different drills and all the way they ranked the guys and stuff at the thing. So, good player. Wasn't a guy, though, that Michigan was ever really in on. Really not from the beginning.
I've watched him on tape, and I'll give the kid credit. I think it was a good choice for him to go to Ohio State because his style fits more of what Urban does with that offense.
Absolutely. And you know, I mean, Michigan State, I mean, Lewerke's rushing yards are usually off, like, broken plays and, like, fluky things. But, yeah, definitely more of a natural fit in the way that Herb likes to do things down there. And then, I think he is going to be I think that's a safe bet. He's a better fit there. It makes sense from you know, if you're him, you got to look out for your future, you know, and I think it's a better fit for his future than Michigan State, maybe. Not that, you know, that's the thing, though, is Michigan State really kind of underrated nationally, though, as far as they've developed their quarterback so really well, you know, so it's suffice to say they probably would have done a good job with him as well, but it just, yeah, you watch him, you know the type of player he is. It just feels like more of an Ohio State quarterback than a Michigan State quarterback.
Absolutely. Well, this next item isn't really recruiting news, more grad transfer news. But last week I thought an interesting story was Berkeley Edwards. Braylon's brother announced he was going to transfer in for his fifth year to Michigan, coming from Central Michigan, which isn't where he started, but where he was last year. Did Michigan pursue him, Steve, or did he ask to come on board?
Boy, that's a great question. I would probably a mix. I'm guessing there's like probably a mutual deal there if I had to guess. You know, a lot of the grad transfers, it's just and I don't believe he's going to be count a scholarship. There's going to be a scholarship there, you know, so I don't know if it was a goodwill deal with the Edwards family or what. I know Berkeley was a guy that Braylon pined hard for to get an offer from the last staff, and he was not happy at all when they didn't. Obviously his career hasn't panned out the way that he or probably his family anticipated. I'd probably say, probably say the answer is somewhere in the middle. I'm sure there was maybe if I had to guess, they probably were the ones to reach out first, but, you know, Michigan has to reciprocate the interest. I mean, they're under no obligation to, you know, just to add a guy to the roster just because, you know, so, and I don't feel like that's Harbaugh's style. I feel like they would have had to agree that it was a fit, to move forward. And, again, that's a thing, you know, Harbaugh in the media, you know, talking about that there are scholarship guys who aren't in the 110 right now, you know, so it's not as if that him joining the roster really guarantees much even, you know, so we'll have to see. That was kind of cool. I mean, it's a good story, you know, Braylon's brother, coming to play for Michigan, but, yeah, that was interesting.
A very nice story. I mean, we'll see what happens with that. The other grad transfer news, and I'm not sure it's even official yet, but I saw this last week, was Jeff George Jr., or Jeff George's son, who I believe was at Illinois. I think he was again last year, but possibly coming in at quarterback for his fifth year. That was interesting.
Yeah, kind of a nothing burger that people got way too Like, it's really weird. Like, so when we report anything on any quarterback that Michigan is recruiting, whether it's like, they're in the 19 cycle, they already have Cade McNamara.
Yeah.
They got their sights set on their top guys in 2020 or whatever. Anytime we report anything on a quarterback, people like lose their minds as if like you're not supposed to recruit a quarterback every cycle or something. That like, because the early returns on Joe Milton are great, that means that Michigan doesn't need a quarterback the next cycle, when in fact, you want to have, that's maybe the most important position to have depth at, as if last year didn't illustrate to Michigan fans that you want to have depth at quarterback, not, pin all your hopes on one guy, and so yeah, I mean, I feel like it could be a deal in those types of situations because, he didn't really see a lot of interest from anybody. And I sometimes wonder, again, with the grad transfer stuff, it's not going to count as a scholarship, where maybe he's a guy that's interested in coaching and could get to learn the process, learn how to quarterback at Michigan for a little bit, but also kind of pick up, the ability to coach. I mean, we've seen how many guys that have left Michigan have come back as like grad assistants, or you got Jordan Kovacs on this. You got James Ross helping out. You got all these guys who are, so it could be a similar situation to that, in my opinion. But yeah, I mean, not as if this edition is like he's going to be under center against Ohio State in November. You know what I mean? And I think like people like saw that and they were like, what? Why are they doing like what? It doesn't make sense. And it's like, no, it's not nearly as. And we didn't even promote it that way. We just reported that he was going to be joining the program. That was it. It wasn't built up into like any. At least we didn't. I don't feel like anybody really did. No. I think it was just more of a, he's going to be joining the program. Obviously noteworthy because his dad, I don't know if they may have played in Indianapolis at the same time. Harbaugh and Jeff George, I don't know. I'm sure they know each other. I mean, they played quarterback in the NFL at the same time. So, I'm sure there's a pre-existing relationship there. So it's noteworthy in that regard. But as far as like its actual impact on the roster, next to nil, and I don't mean that offensively to Jeff George Jr. It's just, I'm sure everybody knows he's probably never going to see the field for Michigan. So.
Well, in a couple of weeks, Steve, we talked about this a bit earlier. The barbecue in the Big House will be taking place. It's been a huge event since Rich Rodriguez was here. Will that be a weekend that we might expect another round of verbals to come from?
If it was, it'd probably be maybe some 2020s. I feel like they're getting to the point now where they're close. They're not close to filling up, but they're getting to that point now where they have the foundation set, and then they can concentrate on the elites for the rest of the cycle type thing. And you rarely, I don't know if the early official visits are going to change the process for some of these top guys. It usually doesn't. They usually try to take it all away. So I don't anticipate like what happened last weekend to happen for the 2019 class. I don't know how many underclassmen they're going to invite to this. I assume there'll be a lot of their top guys. So if it is, it'd probably be more a continuation of building that class. But as far as the elite, like 2019, like right now, I believe Daxton Hill, 5-star safety Daxton Hill, probably their top target at safety, is going to be there, or is supposed to be at the barbecue. I don't anticipate that Daxton Hill would commit while on the visit. I don't think he's going to decide before his season. I think he's going to probably wait, that type of deal. So maybe could be a guy, could get a guy. I'm not really we've barely been putting together the visitor list for that. Yeah. But it is, Rich Rod's enduring legacy, at Michigan is the barbecue, because it's stuck around, and it's always been an incredibly effective recruiting weekend, so it is, it's in a way, he's still it still has an impact, because it's one of the, really without the early official visit weekend, like they had last weekend, without these early official visits, the barbecue was the biggest off-season recruiting event of the year.
Yeah, absolutely.
And so that it's always been a huge thing for them. I do find it kind of comical that they've kept the name and kept the theme like all the way through, from Rodriguez, but they have. So it's always a good event to cover. I'm sure they'll get the visitor list for that is almost always their best of the off season. And again, I suspect with the amount of verbals they have now, I think they'll aim towards getting the elite 2019s up and then probably a bunch of 2020s that they really want to. That'd be my guess.
Well, at this point, again, Steve, 16 verbals in this class of 2019, and who knows what the final numbers will be. That's going to shake out well into the season. I saw an interesting story a couple of weeks ago, and I really have not seen a follow-up or anything from the Michigan staff. It came out of WTOL TV in Toledo, mentioning that there could be another couple of open scholarships. They were reporting that Kakoa Crawford and Kareem Walker could be transferring out. Now, that's something, unless I've missed it in all the busy stuff of summer, I haven't seen anything official on that. Have you?
Jim Harbaugh told us at Grand Valley that he was leaving it up to the departees, or however you would themselves to publicly announce their intentions.
Yeah.
I would say that the report out of Toledo is probably more accurate than not. But again, I would not be able to say 100% for sure, just because Harbaugh, he explicitly would not get into it.
Yeah.
I would say this: he gave us the running back depth chart. He gave us like 7 names. Kareem Walker's name was not one of them. So again, you can read in between the lines there, I suppose. And then, like I said, feel like we'll probably, in the relatively near future, we'll probably see a few announcements. I mean, he had him under the 85. So maybe another one in there too. So we'll just have to kind of wait and see there. But I would say that the Toledo report is probably more accurate than not.
Well, in July, we'll get back together, Steve, and update the class of 2019, maybe talk about 2020, which is starting to heat up, as you mentioned. But right now, as of late June, and looking at this class of 2019, a little better or farther ahead than you thought it might be?
I think a little bit. I've always thought 19 had a lot of potential. And the other thing is, like we talked about with Charbonnet, especially I think a lot of the guys that they have verbally committed are legitimately going to move up the rankings. So I think that'll be good for them as far as the perception goes. I know they don't. It's kind of so you care about the perception, but you kind of don't. Like Michigan's confident in who they evaluate and who they take verbals from. They're not doing the whole Wild West satellite camp verbals that they were a couple of years ago, where Harbaugh was just offering and taking guys like without the rest of the staff knowing, like just and then kind of having to tell them later, like, sorry, like they've kind of cut that out, which is great. So I think that they're not making better evaluations, but they're taking guys that that everyone is comfortable taking. And so I think, but at the same time though, there is perception involved, and you want kids around the country to know you're putting together a quote unquote elite class, and so to be there, I think they're 5th right now. I would assume there'll probably be some shuffling around here in July during the dead period heading into the season. I would assume they'll still be within the top 10 before the season starts. And like I said, that's when the kind of the build for the elite guys really begins, and you win some of those races, and then you're sitting comfortably in the top 5 or 10. So, and the other thing too, people always got to keep in mind, ranking a lot of times will depend on the size of the class too.
Yeah,
so,
absolutely.
So that's something to kind of keep a note of. I think this class is going to be a little bit bigger than what we originally anticipated. But I think the foundation is, they've done very well in the offensive line. I like the guys that they've recruited up front. They're looking to finish with Trevor Keegan. I think is kind of the top target there to finish out. I know Alan True just put in a crystal ball for Michigan. Much like DeCosmo, I've kept mine on Michigan for a long time, even though there were some fluctuations there. I know Ohio State made a big move. It's really probably Michigan or Ohio State for him, which would be a nice head-to-head win for Michigan if they can pull that one out. So, you get the 5 guys that they already have up front committed. You put Keegan in there, and you have a really, really nice 6-man recruiting class up front. And so I think they've done a great job. They needed to address the offensive line. I think they've done an excellent job there. And then really to get Charbonnet at running back too was huge. I know they're definitely not done there. I know Eric Gray remains a name to watch. It's a guy may be deciding in the near future. I think it's Michigan, Alabama, or Penn State. My crystal ball's on Michigan, but I feel like, and from digging last night, all three staffs are kind of in the dark as to what he's going to do. So that one will be really interesting to see how that pans out. So, but yeah, overall, like defensively too, you have to accept who they take if you're a fan, because they know what they're doing. They've proven it. I mean, this will probably, barring something crazy, this will be the third straight year they've fielded the top 10 defense, right? So they know what they're doing on that side of the ball, and they're still getting guys that are ranked really nicely too. So up front, especially. So yeah, I think it's a little bit further ahead than maybe I thought it would be. But again, they put 14 kids in the pros 2 years ago. I thought that they would see some of the impact of that in this cycle, and it looks like they are. So good start. Just got to finish.
As you said, very good start. So when we get back together in July, we'll see what happens. You never know the way these recruiting cycles go. So our guest today on the show on our June recruiting update, and it has been a good month for the Wolverines, is Steve Lorenz from 24/7 Sports. Steve, as always, we love having you on the show. My listeners just eat this recruiting stuff up, as you know. So we'll see what happens over the next 4 weeks and talk in July.
Sounds good, Mike. Appreciate it.
Quick Hits is next as we wrap it up for another week here on The Michigan Man on Wolverine Sports Radio, a member of the V Sporto Network and in partnership with SB Nation's Maize and Brew. On Quick Hits today, Coach B and his team will be heading to Spain in August for a 3-game tour, which will include stops in Madrid and Barcelona. Coach B said it will be a great educational experience for his team, and the best part is they get 10 practices before the trip gets underway. Quinn Hughes was the number 7 pick in last week's NHL draft, going to the Vancouver Canucks. Hughes has just completed his freshman season and reportedly has not made a final decision as to whether he is coming back for his sophomore season or jumping to the NHL. Thanks again to Steve Lorenz from 24/7 Sports for joining us today. He'll be back in July with our next update. We're on our summer schedule until August, when we return to weekly programming and prepare for the fast approaching season. So our next show will go live on July 13th. Wherever you go this summer, take the Michigan Man with you. Our free show app is available from the iTunes and Google Play stores. You can also hear us on iHeartRadio, Spotify, Stitcher, and Wolverine Sports Radio. If you get the show from iTunes, take a minute to rate or comment on the program. Thank you in advance. That will do it for another show. I'm your host, Mike Fitzpatrick. Have a great 4th of July weekend, everyone. And until next time, take care. And as always, go blue. Thanks for joining us today on The Michigan Man, here on Wolverine Sports Radio, a member of the V Sporto Network, and in partnership with SB Nation's Maize and Brew. Our listener lines are open 24/7 for your calls at 313-263-4842. That's 313-263-4842. Or email us at themichiganmanpodcast@yahoo.com. That's the Michigan Man Podcast @yahoo.com. The Michigan Man Podcast is produced at the studios of Robin Lynn Productions, Allen Park, Michigan, and is not affiliated with the University of Michigan. Go Blue!